I'm going to show you how I did these pine needles right here. It's a common question that I get, so I'm going to take a minute to show you. First thing I want to do is put some branches in place. So when I'm doing these pine tree branches, or any tree branches, I do the branches, but I don't do a whole ton of detail. I just get a general idea of where I want to put them. And then I come back after I do the foliage or the needles and I fill in the branches and connect them. I feel like I get a more natural look when I do it that way. When I do basic branches, then the needles, and then detailed branches to connect them all together. So I'll just throw in a few of these. I've already finished this mural, and I'm just gonna add these little extra things just for the sake of doing this video here. So let's just say we're just doing a few branches in here. Maybe let's just make a wild one kind of come down like this. So my tool of choice is a big brush. I've got this 2.5 inch contractor brush here. This is made by Purdy, and I mean, you can get it in any hardware paint store, and it doesn't matter if it's angled or not. The reason that I like this brush is because of the size of the bristles. You could use all different tools. I'm gonna really push these bristles into this water because I want to try to weaken them and make them flare out. Go like this. I'll make sure I've got some water on my hands. Then I'll spin this brush like this. You could use a spinner. There's an actual tool to spin brushes. It's just that I just like doing it with my hands. Start slow, go faster and faster, so you don't make a huge mess. Okay, so not the easiest thing to do, but the effect of it is that it flares out these bristles. Look at what it did to these bristles. Now, I've done it a few times in a row. I mean, that was like the 4th time I did that. And these bristles are all flared out now and ready to do some real fine pine needles for me. So I'll put that there. I'll try to keep that shape, and we'll go back up to the wall. This is just a little Ziploc storage container, and I've got paint just barely in the bottom. Let's go down again. As I barely dip that brush on the surface of this paint, so that just the very tips of those flared out bristles touch the paint. And it's very watered down. This paint is very watered down so that I can get a real streaky effect with it. So you see, just barely on that. You don't have to go real fast. The key here is flare them out as much as you can. Make them coming out from one area. This particular kind of pine tree, they grow in kind of little clumps like this. But the key is do a few at a time and let it dry. I'll come back and do another layer over that rather than trying to crisscross all these needles while it's wet. That's the problem that I think most people run into when doing fine textures like this. We forget that the advantage of these acrylic paints is the fast dry time. So it's easier to partially move to another part of the painting, make some progress there, and then come back to the area after it's dry. You see, these don't look like much interesting right now, but you would be amazed at how quickly a large mural comes together when you just keep moving along, not worrying about what that looks like. You'll see how it comes together when I come back on it after it has some time to dry. And then I'll come out and do some where there's no branches, because I can always put more branches in. And this is a fun way to develop the shape of a tree, is just to put the foliage without the branches. Now see, I'm going to show you something. If I go over this too many times, like this, see what happens with that? No more pine needles. You don't want that. So you do a few and you leave it. Now it does look kind of cool to have that color though, where it's spread real thin. So to look like distant, out of focus pine needles, I will just real quickly and real thin just put some on there, and I'll come back over that with my black. Next step is letting that dry. Okay, these are already dry, you can see. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing again. Just barely dip to the end of this brush, but watch how now I'm going to go a different direction. So you see where I did these? This time, oh, I didn't get enough paint. Hold on. This time, I'll go this way. See, a slightly different direction. And I don't really care if it seems random, like they don't match up, because by the time I'm done, there's going to be needles going every direction. So we'll go here. I mean, if you think about the structure of a pine branch, the needles are coming out in every direction off of the branch. So you're going to have needles stacked on top of each other going every direction. So I'm not trying to be uniform with these. I'm actually trying to make sure that I get some going every single direction. So on this layer, I'll go a little bit different direction. And once again, I'm not going to worry about trying to get everything covered. I'm going to go where there's available dry space and not paint over what I have just done that's wet, because it ruins it. So let's do some more here. See how I'm moving my brush slower? That's when the paint's, you know, a little more sticky and it's not flowing out as quick. So that'll depend on your setup. I've got a bucket of water. If I just barely dip, I just now barely dipped it in that water, and you can see now my brush will very quickly put these needles on. The more wet the paint is, the quicker it'll do that, but too much, it'll start running. Going over the spots I already did. See, I'm not going to touch this in here because I got wet pine needles there. Right here I can see I could do some coming out of the end of this. Okay, again, let it dry. Now if I was doing this whole picture, this would not be such a long process of doing a little bit, letting it dry. I would do this much and then I'd move across this whole picture of pine trees. I mean, there's a lot of pine trees here, you know. If you haven't seen the rest of the project, there's a lot of painting here. I did a whole lot of these needles all across this mural. Okay, so I got to put some black needles over these. Same exact thing with the black. See, I just dipped my brush in the black. Well, get it up there. It's the same exact thing. See those fine little needles? Just zoop. Makes just the nicest, tiniest little lines, and you have that flared out brush. I like doing this, it's fun. I'm constantly just dabbing this brush in the water, just like I do with the paint, just barely dabbing the tip in the water. Yeah, I'm up. So it kind of is skipping. I'm not getting the long, smooth lines that I want. So I'm just going to put a tiny bit more water in the black. Like that. And just put a little bit of water in there. Stir it around with the finger. It's real soupy stuff. I mean, look at this. Just... Now, I don't want to lead you to believe that it doesn't take some practice to get just the right touch. I mean, the speed that you do it matters, the pressure you use matters, trying to keep yourself at a consistent distance matters. I've done it sometimes where it worked better when I went real fast, but this time it seems to be working better when I'm moving slower. So must be because today is a drier day and this paint is not moving as quick. It's just drying real quick on the bristles and on the surface. I don't know. Just wants to move slower, so I'm not going to fight it. Okay, just about done with the black. Now the same way that I did a light color then a dark color to make it look like it's backlit by the sun, I could have done the dark color first then a light color over it, and then it would look like it was front lit. Like if I did a deep green and then a bright green over it, that'd be more like a daytime setting where it was the light was shining from the front. This one I did light color first, so it looks like the sun coming from behind. But the trick here is the layers. The layers, letting them dry, moving on across the painting, and coming back when it's dry to overlap these in different directions. And that's how you get that real nice even flare. So they have that depth to them. Yeah, I'll just stamp this off. I like this stamping technique, it's cool. I like doing that. Alright, so now, here's the fun part. Now I'm going to use black that's not watered down, straight out of my can. I'm using, on this one, I'm just using this cheap Rust-Oleum black that I got from Home Depot. It's just flat black Rust-Oleum latex paint. I'll redo this branch. Actually, we'll redo a whole bunch of these, then I'll add some highlights. You can see how I did that too. But it's fun after you have these branches done, then to come in and, after you have the pine needles done, then to come in and do the branches. And then, sometimes I'll just add little pine needles manually with my detail brush. This is a lot more difficult because it's hard to keep the brush a consistent distance from the wall. So that one it takes more practice than the other technique. I find this to be more difficult. You do this curl. Makes the trees look kind of mystical. It's spooky. Once you have the real light sections, I'll do more. If you go over it with dark ones, it gives it a real 3D look. Like I have those light ones, doing one dark one across the front gives it some nice depth. I just use paint lids for palettes. See, and then I can put the little highlights in that way. I can just do a thin layer of the black. I don't even have to do the needles. Don't even need to do that. You just make it darker just by putting a layer of it over. Just like that. See, it just makes that dark shadow. You can lighten it by stamping it. I'll just come back with some last little bits because I can't stand it. Just darken some areas. Okay, it's done.